On today's show, we're just asking a question. Is the Cavs 3-point defense a problem? We'll discuss all of that and some trade stuff on today's episode of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
All right, the music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify. I'm Chris Manning. I cover the Cavs and the NBA at large for places like Diamond UPROXX and SB Nation's Fear the Sword. Also, the Just Announced Just Basketball podcast. Please go subscribe, rate, review, all of that wonderful stuff. I'll explain more about that once the first episode is up on... Well, it's up on Thursday, but I'll explain a little bit more about what that project is on Friday. The man over there is Evan Dammarell. He's the proprietor of Down Euclid. Today's episode, by the way, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Okay, couple things. Well, one thing really, Evan, to discuss as we kick this off. NBA 2-minute report comes out for Cavs-Knicks from Tuesday night. There are two calls that were deemed incorrect that would have helped the Cavs late in this game. You have a non-call on R.J. Barrett, where he makes contact with Mitchell's arm around 49 seconds. That they said should have been called a foul. And then with 6.5 seconds to go, Isaiah Hartenstein brings his arm down after he jumped vertical and makes contact on Mitchell's arm and affected what would have been a potential go-ahead game-winning basket. That was deemed a no call, an incorrect no call as well. Nothing that obviously changes the outcome of the games. I know these things make people very mad. I understand these being no calls, and it's we'll see if that changes things going forward. There's another, there's some other stuff in this detailed report as well that you can look at, but there's a no defensive 3 seconds called on Evan Mobley that would have mattered as well theoretically, but. They are what they are. I think you can feel how you feel about it. Maybe this does change things if they get called the right way or whatever, but I kind of shrug my shoulders at stuff like this sometimes.
Yeah, that's all you really can do at the end of the day is just shrug your shoulders and say, it is what it is. It's not like the NBA is going to make the Cavs and the Knicks go back and play the final 2 minutes of action after the fact.
Could you imagine? They're like, hey, replay the last 6.5 seconds.
Well, the Houston Rockets, when they audited the Western Conference Finals a few years ago, would be advocates of that. But regardless, this just has no impact. It's more than anything just to provide transparency that the referees are human. It is hard to make these decisions and calls. And I know people who sit at home or watch these replays from every angle imaginable, like this approved of film, will probably disagree with me on this. But it's really hard to make these calls sometimes in tight situations like that. And I don't envy NBA officials for that position, but it's just kind of confirming what a lot of us knew just watching the game at home. And again, there's just nothing you can do about it. It just provides transparency in the fact that, the refs do miss calls sometimes, clearly.
Also should note that on the injury report, the latest one, the 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time one, a 6:31 will come out as well while we're recording, so we can update you in the end of the show with that. But Donovan Mitchell, is it out?
It's out. Donovan Mitchell's questionable today against the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, which he was on the 5:30 one as well.
Yeah, and then Mamadi Diakite is available. Ricky Rubio is available. That makes me assume that Rubio probably won't play against the Thunder the following night. And then Isaiah Mobley's out and Dylan Windler's still out. So not a lot has changed, but I just obviously Mitchell being questionable and not doubtful, I think maybe that's somewhat encouraging. And after practice today, Kelsey Russo noted that it was not really a groin strain that Mitchell's dealing with. It's just soreness just from the pre-existing injury. So we'll just kind of monitor this as we go, and we'll probably not really have an idea of whether or not Mitchell's playing until the Cavs take the hardwood against Houston later tonight.
So, okay, let's move on to main topic of the show, which is going to be, at least for segment one, the Cavs 3-point defense. Evan, here's where I stand on this.
Lay it on me.
I think that this is not fully a problem that I'm super, super worried about. if I'm the Cavs. So right now, there are some numbers that would make you go like, okay, like this is a little bit weird. Like there is something going on there. They're giving up about league average in terms of the amount of 3-pointers they're giving up per game. They're like 16th in how many threes they're giving up percentage-wise of shots. They're giving up a ton of non-corner threes, more than like about 11th in terms of how many corner threes. So not a lot of non-corner threes, and then more corner threes is kind of like their defensive shot profile at this current time. In terms of how teams are making shots against the Cavs, Cavs are second in league. We touched on this at the end of the show on Wednesday, but Cavs are currently 29th in the NBA in terms of how teams are shooting against them from three. Teams are shooting 38% from three against the Cavs, 42.7% from the corner, 36.2%, which is above league average on non-corner threes. Only team worse is the San Antonio Spurs. The rest of the teams in the bottom five: the Pacers, the Raptors, the Wolves, and then the Cavs, and then the Spurs. Here's, Evan, why I'm a little not worried about this. In going back and watching some film and watching just some clips and kind of thinking about just how they approach this, maybe you cut off the corners a little bit more. Maybe that's like an adjustment you make in your scheme. Maybe that's like something you look at. But it doesn't feel to me like their process and how they're always, like for the most part, they're not like just giving teams like super, super easy threes over and over again. Like teams are making some makeable shots, but the Cavs are not necessarily just like allowing them to get whatever shots they want. And again, if like Julius Randle's going to make 8-9 threes against you, like I think the shot making maybe just wins out and you're dealing with teams being hot against you right now. There is like a luck and just sort of like throw your hands up in the air aspect to 3-point defense. That is just the reality of it. But where that is where I stand. I don't think it's a big concern. I get that it's probably like very annoying for the team and very annoying for people watching this team. But what do you make of this Cavs 3-point defense, and particularly over the last couple weeks, including the Knicks game the other night?
I mean, the 3-point defense, like you said, it's a bit of a crapshoot. I think it's emblematic of how the Cavs play defense at times too. Like they have good perimeter defenders in like Isaac Okoro and Lamar Stevens that they could throw out there, but like Stevens only plays spot minutes now, especially with the team getting healthier. And just looking at the starting five, other than Okoro, it's Evan Mobley, who's probably the most comfortable defending out there as well in space, and just recovering from defending in the paint, defending in isolation too. So it's tricky to fully scope like the actual impact, but I think you laid it out really nicely. And I just think people have a lot of like, at least in the rear view mirror, like the Golden State game where the Warriors just put up like absolute video game numbers against the Cavs in this game. And you can also look at the fact like last night against the Knicks, like Julius Randle went bombs away. But if you look at across the board, like Cleveland did a really good job defending the New York otherwise. Like Julius Randle was the anomaly and he was just hot and feeling it from out there in three. And like Chris said, like at some point you kind of have to just throw your hands up and say like there's nothing we can do in this situation. But if you look at how they defended Jalen Brunson or how they defended RJ Barrett or just really any player of note on New York outside of like their core like three quote unquote star guys, it's just really hard. And I think recency bias is just really weighing down on just like this general stigma that the Cavs aren't like an amazing 3-point defense team, but also like the Cavs can't be perfect at everything either. They're still young, they're still growing. I'm not surprised. Again, this is like they play a bit of a hybrid drop scheme where like a lot of it is like they'll concede 3-point looks to protect in order to protect the paint. That's kind of just how Cleveland operates at the end of the day, and that makes sense with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley is just like your primary defensive duo locking down the interior. And it's kind of like the starting wing spot. I don't think there's like a clear cut answer on how to like fix this right away. I don't think it's something you can fix right away. It's more so something you just have to kind of roll with and maybe make adjustments with and just work through this awkward balancing act. Our team is getting healthy. We're trying to get guys back. We're trying to see what rotations and lineups do and don't work. And sometimes like you have to do a little bit of this calculus and gambling in real time because you only get so many practice reps and in-game reps to do all this stuff. So it's not like overly concerning to me. I think I look more so at the fact that like Cleveland just doesn't have the firepower on their side of things to maybe match it when a team just kind of gets blitzingly hot. Like you can go way back, and like Brooke Lopez was a howitzer against the Cavs the first time they played Milwaukee too. Like there's just games like this happen and the Cavs just don't have the personnel to really match that.
It doesn't even, to me, it doesn't feel totally even just like a defensively, I think you're like offensively. I think it is like the personnel thing. I think defensively, it's just like they've dealt with just like the Warriors thing was just like they I think they do struggle a little bit with teams that are playing very spaced out and have a lot of like athleticism and are going to stretch you and like deal with two bigs in that way. I think they're kind of struggling to find answers with that. Jackson Flickinger, a friend of the program, wrote something about this over at Fear the Sword, and he pointed out, like in this piece, that the Cavs had teams going into, I think this was the Knicks game, teams had shot 42% on their threes against the Cavs over that last 15-game stretch. Like the Cavs defense over that stretch was 17th in defensive rating. For the year, they're third in overall defense. So like this tells you that this run has like impacted their defensive quality, and it feels like that in terms of I think how they've played. I am curious just to see like if this maybe just like normalizes. And like, or if there are adjustments, like, do they like look maybe try to cut out some corner threes from opposing team shot diets and not give those up as much? Are there adjustments you can make there? I would tend to think there are. Is there a trade they make at the deadline that gives them someone that maybe helps shore like up the perimeter stuff a little bit? Maybe. I just also just like look again. I just keep if Julius Randle is maybe to me the perfect example of this, and then it's just like. That dude went off from 3. Yeah. And you just kind of like, you have to survive that sometimes. You didn't that night. And like, you might have to survive that in the playoffs. And if you can, and that dooms you, that I guess like, it's just you tip the hat to the shot making. The process doesn't feel broken to me though, but like, maybe I'm wrong. But I tend to not think that the process is super broken here.
I don't think you're wrong in this instance. And again, I agree with you. Like the process doesn't necessarily disagree with it, or at least the eye test isn't. Like Cleveland's still a very good defensive team. I just think there's again a lot of recency bias against like what is and isn't working for this Cavs squad just defensively. And I think just under the microscope of these multiple frustrating losses, whether it's the Grizzlies loss not too long ago, or this one to the Warriors, the one last night against the Knicks. And again, like folks can also just point to the 2-minute reports like, oh no, it's the official's fault. But the Cavs also put themselves in this situation too. And to Chris's point, I think these are learning experiences for Cleveland. I still think they're trying to figure out how to win these really close games and just these games that are really tight in general, and also maybe deal with a guy who is just otherworldly shooting. And again, the Cavs understood the defensive assignment. Like they think they're willing to concede and gamble with Julius Randle taking 3-pointers because on the season, he's shooting just a hair above 30% from 3-point range. And he really thrives on the interior as a bigger body, and you don't want him kind of just getting comfortable looks at the rim because it's just going to kind of collapse and destroy your entire defensive identity with Mobley and Allen. And maybe you're like, okay, we will gamble and see if we can allow him to take these 3-point attempts. And some folks will say, well, they're wide open. And I'm like, I wouldn't say they're wide open. Just sometimes it's just good defense, better offense in a lot of these scenarios too. Like I looked back at a lot of these Julius Randle shots and it's like, okay, yeah, the Cavs sometimes gave him a couple looks, but then after a while, like he made like a couple, they're like, okay, we need to defend him honestly from the perimeter. And the problem is he just kept making them, and there's not a lot you can do in those scenarios either. And then again, Cleveland had a very good defensive approach to the rest of New York's lineup. I just don't think they were able to fully account for Julius Randle becoming a howler from 3-point range Tuesday night rather.
Bingo. All right, we're going to come back after this break. We are going to look at two names that are possible Cavs trade targets now that we kind of know the price for them, and that's Josh Richardson and Doug McDermott, both from the San Antonio Spurs. But first, we have an ad read for you. I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, but we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number one sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers join today and get started with $150 in free bets, guaranteed. When you place your first $5 bet, just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. If you're looking ahead to the upcoming AFC and NFC championship title games this weekend, you've got the Chiefs that are favored over the Bengals by 1.5. The Eagles are favored over the Niners by 2.5. There's props in all of those games. And there's NBA stuff as well. You can get MVP odds. You can get NBA title futures, all of that stuff. The Cavs, by the way, are plus 1,800 if you're interested in a Cavs title future. All of that, by the way, is on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans and basketball fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, segment 2, Locked On Cavs. Chris Manning, Evan Dammarell. Evan, 2 names. Michael Scotto from HoopsHype has got it out there that the price for Josh Richardson from San Antonio is 1 second-round pick. Doug McDermott, another wing from San Antonio, would be multiple. The Cavs, a couple of summers ago, were interested in McDermott in free agency. He goes to San Antonio. Richardson has been kind of, I think we have speculated about like his just maybe being a need. Evan, I think I would prefer McDermott.
Okay, explain.
The shooting to me, I just cannot watch the Cavs anymore and not think that a guy who could really stretch things out, another guy that isn't, you're not relying on Kevin Love for that stretch, would make a really big difference. I think Josh Richardson's like a useful player. I think he is an interesting upgrade, but like, do I feel like that he is like a significant upgrade over necessarily what you have? Like, I think he's probably an upgrade over Jetty. So if it's like Jetty and Windler for him, I think you're getting a better player out of that. And if it's 1 second-round pick, I think that's like a reasonable wing upgrade. And McDermott is going to be a little bit worse of a defender. And maybe that's like, and there is the open question of like, how would Bickerstaff kind of utilize a player like that? I think it'd be interesting to see. I just think the shooting would make things so much easier, and he would be really kind of useful. And I don't mind that he's under contract for next year as well, because you could keep that. You have him either under contract or he's a number you can then use in another trade if you decide you need to flip something again next year. And it keeps kind of some salary in your books instead of it just expiring. I don't think that's a bad thing if you're kind of a team like Cleveland that's going to need to like take salaries and second-round picks with players and try to turn them into other stuff when you need to turn over your roster. So I think I would prefer McDermott. I'm more of Team Richardson just from the defensive aspect. I think if you want to take the shooting aspect to a very high extreme, like when I don't know if folks could hear me, but I was looking at Doug McDermott's numbers. Like this season, he's connecting on 42.1% of his 3-point attempts, which I believe is okay. It's not even his best shooting season overall. Like his best shooting season came 2 seasons ago with the Indiana Pacers, where he was primarily a 6-man for the Pacers at the time. But regardless, like Doug McDermott is very, very good at 3-point shooting. He's a bigger wing who's like a 3-4-ish type player because he's 6'7", 225. You can play him in a lot of different ways. Like if the Cavs want to go really big, like they can play him at the 2 if they want, or they can also put up the 4 if they want to go small. But to your point, I would be curious to see how JP Bickerstaff would employ a Doug McDermott. And that's where I kind of circle back to Richardson. And I think there is an avenue, or at least a possibility, where Richardson, because he's in the last year of his deal, could be gone after this year, and it's more of a cheap upgrade. And I think the Cavs are kind of looking for moves within the margins like that, or maybe if they just sacrifice a 2nd-round pick, and it's like you said, Jetty Osman is like the attachment to it, or even Dylan Windler as well, just kind of grease the wheels on this trade, because San Antonio has like a logjam at the wing spot. Like they have guys like Malachi Branham and so on, just waiting to get minutes in their rotation, and they kind of got to get rid of guys like Richardson. So if it just depends on how rich the cost is for Cleveland. Like I think you want to look at it like if you just want to make like a cheaper marginal move, it's Richardson. But it's, for me, just from the trade optic standpoints, from the play standpoint, like Richardson is a very streaky shooter at the end of the day. And I think that's a fair criticism. I think that's a fair concern, because like you look at teams like Dallas who went and tried to get Richardson, and they thought he'd be the difference maker, and he ended up not being it. Or like Boston, because there's a lot of intangibles, and you look at the counting stats and the highlights and things like that, and you're like, okay, yeah, he could work in theory, but there is some quiet concerns with how streaky he can be as a shooter at times. But I think if you're the Cavs, if he's like your 5th banana in this offense, and if let's just say you're plugging Richardson in as the starting Cleveland, like I think you're willing to maybe take that risk, because he's only going to be pretty much exclusively shooting from 3-point range. Like he's not going to be soaking up a ton of shot opportunities like from the last few games. Like all the games the Spurs have played in January, Richardson has been in double digits more often than not shooting wise. I think that's going to go down quite a bit. I think he only plays 21 to 25 minutes tonight, especially if you keep like Isaac Okoro on your roster too. And
I would assume Karis LeVert is the casualty in this trade as well, just to make the money work too. So I think I'm just more Team Richardson because there's a little bit of that defensive aspect where he's able to provide a little bit of perimeter defense relief so that you're not asking way too much of Mobley and Jared Allen. So it kind of goes in with our first segment where the Cavs maybe don't have a lockdown defender, but they have a more reliable stable of guys who can play perimeter defense, but in Richardson's case, provide that 3-point shooting. So I'm leaning more that way, but I can definitely understand the argument for Doug McDermott too, where it's 3-point shooting to an extreme. And Chris has told me several times just off the air, the Cavs need a 3.5, a guy who can play the 3 and the 4 essentially. And I think McDermott more fits that mold than Richardson does for sure. And I agree, they do need something like that. But to me, I think you can't just hang your cap on one wing upgrade. You try to maybe go get 2 players. If it's between these two, you can make an argument for either.
I just think the price that we are going to see the Cavs move at is absolutely going to be this level of player. And I'm curious to see, do they just throw, do they do what the Lakers did with Rui Hachimura and throw, all of their second-round picks at something? That is the way you could go. I don't think they will. I don't think
you should either.
There is a player who's purportedly, maybe the team would take calls on who I would do it for, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. How about that for a freaking tease? But, I think for, the McDermotts, the Richardsons, the Josh Harts, even the Malik Beasleys, I am not super plussed or pressured to give up all of your picks for this stuff. I think that I can understand wanting to, and I think the trades are the trade structures to me are either Karis LeVert or Cedi Osman plus Dylan Windler. Or if you're going to do both of them, all 3 of those guys and get to a bigger number, maybe that unlocks something else. But if it's gonna you could do 2 of these guys for 3 of those guys for 2 guys and whatever. But it feels maybe you're just gonna get one of them and for a couple second round picks, and we'll see what the market's like. But let's go into one more break. We'll come back. We're gonna power rank some of the trade options we know about right now, right after this. All right, back here on Locked On Cavs, Chris Manning and Evan Dammarell. Evan, let's power rank trade targets. I couldn't get all the words out there. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some names.
Okay.
And we're gonna just place them. We're gonna put these names in order. I have 6 names for you. I'm adding one that I forgot about on the fly here.
Oh, I love a last minute edition. Throw it at me, playa.
All right. So here are the 5 names in no order. There's 6 names in order: Josh Hart, Saddiq Bey, Malik Beasley, Bojan Bogdanovic, Doug McDermott, and Josh Richardson. Those are the 6.
Are we just talking from a pure fit
we're
point,
saying
or are we just
pure just you could, let's just say you could get them and you could actually pull these trades off. Who moves the needle the most? And two of these guys I do not necessarily believe they're going to be able to get based on picks. Those would also be the top 2 on my list. And that for me, that's Saddiq Bey and Bojan Bogdanovic, both from the Detroit Pistons.
I agree. I think Saddiq Bey is number 1 though, just because of age. And I think if you're Cleveland, maybe you're willing to take the gamble on paying him to a somewhat of an extension at this point, just because in theory he provides exactly what you need, which is defense, a little bit of that grit the Cavs kind of look for in players, and also just 3-point shooting more than anything. And then Bogdanovic is the McDermott aspect with the 3-point shooting extremes, but he's a bigger body who can play the 3 or the 4. Can provide you some rebounding and playmaking as well. But the problem is just Bogdanovic and also Bey, I think, is just what is Detroit willing to do to talk shop with? And Chris, I'll concede the floor to you. If the Pistons somehow say listen, we want a Rui Hachimura package for Saddiq Bey, the Cavs are tripping over themselves and sprinting to the phone, offering as many second round picks as they can, 3 or 4 to get him.
I would call the Pistons tomorrow and be like, hey man, hey Troy Weaver, do you want you up, bro? I got 2 phones, I'm Joe Dumars. Can we talk? We're going here. I would be do you want Evan, a trade that works that is hilarious to me is in the cap in the trade machine is Dylan Windler and 4 second round picks for Saddiq Bey. that works math wise,
Yeah,
and that's hilarious. That is hilarious to me because like it's just like here's the matching salary, and we'll just give you like a bunch of picks, and I would do that. So Bey is number one on my list. The age thing is right. Sneakily, it's a good Kevin Love like kind of like replacement plan that you're going to get, and that's at a good age on the upward curve. Sneakily, that's like kind of like a little important thing you would be doing. Different player, I understand that, but like you're going out and getting like something you'd have to spend on, and is can be kind of hard to get. And I don't totally like. It's been reported that like they would only take like a first for Bey. We'll see if he even gets moved. I'm kind of skeptical, but like that would be a guy I would go out really hard on. And Bogdanovic, look, if he ends up being available for like less than a first, even at the age, I would probably do it. I just don't know if they're going to take less than a first.
Yeah, and if you're Detroit, why would you? And I think using the Saddiq Bey trade is like, or not Saddiq Bey, apologies. The Rui Hachimura trade is like an example, isn't like the best way to go about it, just because the Wizards aren't the best run organization.
That trade is
that's a very when I saw what the Wizards got
$25 million. Okay.
When I saw it, I understand why they want to try and keep Kuzma, but Kuzma's also a UFA, so it's not like they're like guaranteed to keep him at this point.
Correct.
But the same time, like you look at just the Wizards' history of like moving some of the guys they've drafted in the top 10 for like pennies on the dollar. Like it's frustrating if you're a fan of that organization, I think, and just it becomes more clear that they're not going to go anywhere, even with Brad Beal signing them to more money than God. But that's another argument for another day. We kind of stopped with the Pistons duo, so let's keep going down the list a little bit here.
All right, so I mean they're the most interesting ones. Who would you have three? If we have the Bey, then Bogdanovic, who would you have three?
Probably Richardson or McDermott. Like there's like a 3A, 3B. And then after that, I'd have Malik Beasley and then Josh Hart. But I like Josh Hart as a player more than most do. I just think maybe you're getting an older-ish offensively what you give Isaac Okoro, just a touch more playmaking at the end of the day too. And like I think Josh Hart fits with like what JB Bickerstaff looks in for, like a starting small forward or a guy coming off the bench. I think he'd be a good veteran, but the shooting numbers just aren't really there for me to say like, yeah, the Cavs should go in on Josh Hart like 100% unless they have, like I said in the last segment, if they're able to acquire a guy like Richardson or McDermott as well to just kind of like bolster this wing rotation you have.
So I would go Malik Beasley 3.
Really?
The shooting is just I think the shooting thing is just such a big deal. You have enough wings already that do the thing. Like Josh Richardson would help. He would be an upgrade on your guys. I'm not going to say he's not, but like they need something different than the same thing they have in a different jersey.
That's fair.
I like especially if Isaac Okoro, if they believe that the Isaac Okoro minutes you've got in the last like several weeks are real, then I think I want something different. Give me a guy who shot 37% on three this year, 38 the year before, 40 the year before, 42 the year before that. Has shot 42%, somewhere between 37 and 42% on threes every year since the 1920 season, and just like moves and shoots. Like you need that kind of thing. That's why I go McDermott 4. I go Josh Hart 5, and I go Richardson 6. And I would put Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't know where I put him in this. He probably should have been the 7th on this list. The other reason that I would prefer,
I have a 7th. I have an 8th name to suggest as well.
Okay. The reasons I think I prefer Beasley and McDermott is just from like like you do not like, yes, like you get them under contract at a number you already know for another year. You do not have to worry about then losing them in UFA if they don't want to take the mid-level or whatever it is. Like, I kind of like just having that trade chip in my pocket. So like on draft night, when you can trade a first round pick again, whatever it is, you have just a little more like kind of built-in trade stuff for the offseason. And just from like a turning over your roster kind of scenario. That is where I would go with it. I just think shooting would help this team in an extreme. Yeah. Just shooting would help this team in such an extreme way above any other skill I think they could possibly go out and get.
That's fair. I think just again, like the Cavs are looking for 3-point shooting more than anything. They obviously would like some help on the perimeter as well, just because Cedi Osman ain't it in terms of perimeter defense, and Isaac Okoro ain't it in terms of perimeter shooting. Even the numbers are starting to show like some signs of growth in production. The name for you that I have is Bogdanovic. How would you feel about the Cavs trying to like acquire him from the Hawks? Because the Hawks are just a team that are constantly itching to make a move.
They are that 3-team construction that was John Collins to Utah, LeVert to Atlanta, and Bleezy to Cleveland was funny to me just because that just felt like
you're moving the shares on the ship.
Well, it's just like a salary dump for Atlanta. Like, I don't know what they're getting out of it. Pulling up his basketball reference page. Did you know that Bojan Bogdanovic's Twitter handle is at leader of horde? Like HORDE, like a horde.
It's probably a World of Warcraft reference, but go ahead.
That's just like, okay. That's just like a random one. I didn't expect to see leader of horde as like an
for the horde, dude. Zug.
Okay.
Blood and stone.
He has a player option for next year, $18 million. I feel like trading for him would be almost like maybe moving chairs around, and you have the same injury concerns as like he missed time to start the year. Like, has only played 23 games so far this year. Like, would be a good player. The health stuff is like a real concern with me though.
That's just my issue with it. Like, I had a friend that we were talking about Bogdanovic, and he thought I was talking about the Hawks one, and I was just like, oh no, the Pistons one I was talking about. I'm like, the Hawks one I'm not too high on just because of the injury concerns. Like, the shooting is definitely there. He's bigger enough, I guess, and I just think that was just a misfire by the Hawks, just paying him all that money and just hasn't worked out. And I don't know if, again, like that 3-teamer you mentioned, if it happens to be Malik Beasley in that scenario of like you're swapping Malik Beasley for Caris LeVert, like, yeah, that's a good upgrade. But I think you need to try and just like look elsewhere. And if it's selfish of me to kind of like look at it from this lens, but if you're the Cavs, like I try to go get at least like 1 or 2 wing upgrades, just because like you're not going to find the permanent answer, but you can at least maybe slap a Band-Aid on this issue. And then when you clear salary space this offseason, maybe you can shift focus towards that. And then maybe you find your quote unquote permanent answer at that point.
They just aren't going to be. The thing about it is like even if they have an expiring contract in LeVert, they just are not going to be. They're not a cap team.
They aren't, no.
And
we should circle back to our original point when we talked about trades. Their big move was to get Donovan Mitchell. So if you include that with all their trade deadline moves, the Cavs already get an A+ because they emptied the clip to get the best player on the trade market this summer.
No, I think the reality though is that like any of these wing options that you are going to look at and consider like where they're at, they're very clearly just going to like have to just figure out like solutions that are going to look imperfect to people. And like looking at I'm pulling up the spot track cap sheet very here. I'm trying to see what their expected cap room is for the next league year. And look, we'll see what the CBA looks like too. Like Lord knows, like there's going to be some tax. Windy had some reports of this week about like tax implications on stuff, which is kind of interesting. But so you're going to have. This is what you have on the cap for next. These are the players you have under contract for next year. Darius Garland's at making an estimated $33.5 million based on the percentage of the cap. Donovan Mitchell's at 32.6. Jared Allen's at 20. Okoro's at 8.9. Evan Mobley's at 8.8. Jetty Osman is on a non-guaranteed 6.7. Ricky Rubio's at 6.1. Dean Wade is at 5.7. Lamar Stevens is at a non-guaranteed $1.9 million. They are not going to be like a cap-based team with some of these numbers they have. They will have some cap holds. But they have a decent chunk of the roster to like kind of fill out. And I wonder if I'm very curious to see like how that will be very interesting to see how they kind of churn some of this over for next year. But that's a question for another day. Evan, let me just ask yes or no question.
Okay.
Well, is there a scenario where I think people will look at the trade deadline for the Cavs and give it and it'll just be like a wow, like that's a perfect trade? Yes or no? I tend to think no.
No, I don't think a perfect trade really exists. There's going to be a winner and a loser at the end of the day. But no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think people are just going to be like, that was fun. That was an okay move. I can understand that, but it's not going to be like melt your brain, change your trajectory kind of trade.
I was going to say it's not going to be like it maybe in the moment, like when the Cavs acquired Caris LeVert, you're thinking like, yeah, this is the fit that makes a lot of sense. But with the power of hindsight, you can say this trade really hasn't worked out because the Cavs gave up a first round pick for a guy that they're about to ship out. So I don't know. Right. It's tough.
Yes. All right. That is going to be it for this episode of Locked On Cavs. Thanks again for the one and only Jake Stevens for producing us. We'll be back on Friday recapping Cavs Rockets, which you can find a line for over at FanDuel, by the way. And we'll get you ready for Cavs Thunder and the weekend ahead of Cavs basketball as well. We'll have an update, I'm sure, by then about Donovan Mitchell's status and see what's going on there. But until next time, I'm Chris. That's Evan. Be well.